Thank you for joining us today at Keiser University Multidisciplinary Center. Our webinar is focusing on dropout prevention. April 16, 2019, presented by Dr. Rosa. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And as always, it's a pleasure to be here. If you're listening to this on record, you're going to want to just write down my email now or take a picture of it. So that way, if you have any questions or any follow-up, you can feel free to email me. But today we're going to talk about dropout prevention, and this could be an apropos time in your schools as we are in the month of April, and students, possibly at least here in Florida, they have about 4 to 6 weeks left of school, and in that time, some of them may already be deciding whether they're going to continue, whether consciously or unconsciously, whether they want to continue or not. Based on numerous factors, but at this point, probably based on their grades, whether they think they can pass or not. So right now in your classrooms, you may have students that are contemplating whether they should drop out of school or not. So this is a timely workshop, and it also is sort of a summary of all of our workshops, because everything we do here at the Multidisciplinary Center is to prevent students, to make sure students succeed, and that they graduate and they go on to whatever goal they want to achieve. So all of our webinars really, if you follow our strategies, are focused on dropout prevention. So for this workshop, and this workshop's going to cater to many different audiences, to teachers who would want some immediate strategies to implement in their classroom, to administrators who want to just create maybe dropout programs or create a culture that will prevent students or minimize the number of students that are dropping out. Also, this is informational as well, so that if you want to host your own professional development at your school, then some of the information, some of the statistics you'll be able to share, so that way you can start the conversation at your schools at an individual level. But during the workshop, we're going to talk a lot about statistics on dropout rates for students in the US system. We're going to talk a little bit about why students drop out of school. And of course, these are just generalizations because it is an individual choice to drop out. But what are some trends we see in the literature and in the classroom? And then we're going to talk about some strategies for preventing students from leaving school. And these strategies are going to be systematic as well as practical. So catering to all different audiences. So if you're watching this webinar and you like the information and you want to share it with someone on your leadership team or in your district, then feel free to do that as well. So here are some statistics, and we're going to go talk about statistics that deal with minority groups, along with students with learning disabilities. So just from a graduations perspective, and when you review the literature, you're going to see many statistics. So I tried to give a snapshot of what were some of the trends in the statistics and where that can give you an accurate picture of where we are. So as far as students with learning disabilities, 70.8% of students with student learning disabilities and 72.1% of students with OHI left school in 2013-14 with a regular diploma, lagging behind the national average by about 10 percentage points. So we already know that students with disabilities may already feel different, may feel isolated. So it's not surprising that these factors, along with others, make this population of students more susceptible to dropping out of school. The graduation gap for students with disabilities is even worse among some racial and ethnic groups. Approximately 35% of Black, Hispanic, and Native American students with disabilities left high school without a regular diploma, compared to less than 25% of Asian and white students. So we see this a lot in the literature, the double minority being Black and woman, female, or Hispanic and female being mixed. So having these two minority statuses in your, as a student, as a demographic is an indicator, and the statistics show that the graduation rates are less for these students. So this is why we need to pay more particular attention and create intervention plans. Students with IEPs were 85% more likely, and students with 504 plans were 110% more likely to repeat a grade than their peers without disabilities. And this is 2014 statistics. I know the number of students with IEPs have increased, so that may have impacted these numbers, but out of 2014, another startling number, 85% more likely and 110% to repeat a grade. Children with learning and attention issues are 3 times more likely to drop out of school than students who don't have these issues. These statistics are for those who think there's not a problem. These are statistics that you will share to highlight what's happening nationwide. Nationally, about 5.9% of students drop out of school, but among children with learning and attention issues, about 18% drop out of school. When students drop out of school, they are more likely to earn low wages and have high stress. So if you look at school, if you look at education as a means of upward mobility, when students, any population of students, do not earn that degree, then it's what we call the cycle of poverty. And then the cycle of poverty continues because students will just be earning the wages per their degree, and the chances of upward mobility does decrease. And here are some of the challenges that we can start tackling. Nearly 1 in 5 students, 19% with IEPs, miss 3 or more weeks of school each year, compared to about 1 in 8 students without IEPs. School aversion and chronic absenteeism could be a sign of unidentified or inadequately addressed learning and attention issues. And this seems very common sense, but something that we need to keep an eye and monitor, and this will be one of the solutions we talk about, monitoring our attendance, because obviously if students aren't in school, then they aren't learning, and it's going to be more challenging to not only pass our assessments, but also to be engaged overall and have a desire for school. Students with disabilities are more than twice as likely to be suspended as students without disabilities. And the loss of instructional time increases the risk of repeating a grade and dropping out. In 2013-14, 65% of all special education disciplinary removals involve students with SOD or OHI, other health indicators. Many removals are made at the discretion of school officials. So there is some opportunity for some subjectivity because the decisions to remove are made by our school officials. So it's important that our school officials are looking at all of the information and making what's in the best decision for the student and looking at the situation and the circumstances. But there is some good news. Statistics can be spun in many different directions. Well, we do have some good news, and particularly for the nationwide and for the state of Florida. The high school graduation rate for students with disabilities across the nation is on the rise. So for 2016-17, this is more recent data, the graduation rate for those with disabilities reached 67.1%, and that's up from 65.5% the previous year. And it represents the 6th year in a row that the rate has increased. Also, particularly for Florida, in general, overall, Florida's high school students are graduating at record rates, hitting a 15-year high in the last school year at 86.1%. Almost every category of race and disability showed progress, including African-American students, Hispanic students, students with disabilities, and poor students. And that is recent data from 2018. So particularly for the state of Florida, there has been an increase. However, when you look at the state of Florida overall, out of the 50 states, even though there are many different rankings out there, most of the rankings, we are in the 40s, and more specifically, number 43. Of rated and in education. So while we are improving within the state, there is not an improvement when we compare state versus state. So there's still some major issues here in Florida. Schools in Lafayette County between Gainesville and Tallahassee had the highest district-wide graduation rate in the state at 97.4%, while DeSoto County, centered around Arcadia, came in last at 60.9%. In addition, the state reported 3.5% of students across Florida dropped out, while the remaining seniors who have not yet graduated are still enrolled in school, pursuing alternatives such as working on an equivalent degree or taking adult education classes. So just because they have not graduated with a diploma, there are still 3.5% that are still working on it and then will be considered under the numbers. The most interesting thing about all this information is that these statistics do not include charter schools. So one way the state of Florida has beefed up the statistics per se is to not leave to leave out charter schools. So that I think that's very interesting. And not all schools are the same. Not all charter schools perform poorly. Not all charter schools perform above expectations. So, but they did leave out the numbers. So this is only about the public education here in Florida. So what is the long-term impact of any students with disabilities, minorities, and anyone that drops out of school? Well, special education students who drop out are 4 times less likely to enroll in higher education compared to those who graduate. And that refers to my earlier point about the cycle of poverty continuing for this group of students. Criminal activity and incarceration rates are higher for dropouts. A higher percent of individuals in correctional institutions are high school dropouts who receive special education services while in school. Young adults who dropped out of school tend to rely more on family members for financial and social support. So that puts a strain on the family, especially if the family is not in a good economic condition to begin with and was hoping that their child would be able to contribute and be able to help the family as a whole increase their socioeconomic status. And when you look at society as a whole, if you look at the individual person, I don't have a child, why do I care? Well, this is important. Taxpayers spend approximately $51,000 per year to incarcerate one person compared to approximately $11,500 to educate one child with a disability. So if we know that dropout rates do lead to high criminal activity, and we know that it costs more to run our prison system, then it looks like an investment, a savings, and it's in everyone's interest to focus more on educating and spending money on educating students with disabilities or other minority students. So what are some reasons why students are more likely to drop out? So if you're watching this on your record, think about, make this specific to your classroom, to your school. Think about the certain individuals that have dropped out that and what were some of the reasons behind that? Because this is going to be different for every district, every individual school. But some of it is performing poorly on assessments, and it could be a combination of students' ability to grasp material, students' ability to demonstrate knowledge and mastery of the material, and it also could be some of the services that the schools have set out to provide. For example, there may be a misidentification of the disability, therefore the student does not receive the appropriate accommodations. The provisions of needed accommodations, maybe they're not clear or the information is not passed on from teacher to teacher, even if it's in the IEP. And then some schools, some districts just may not have, or family members may not have the money or the time for support services. So we cannot just look at grades and say, all right, this person is going to either succeed or fail, but the overall, what are we doing to help the student? That's going to indicate why students are likely to drop. Students with math and reading skills below grade level are at an increased risk of dropping out, as well as students whose GPAs are at a lower than 1.2 by the spring semester of first grade. And at the 6th grade, failing grades in math, reading, or both are significant signs that the student will drop out at some point. As middle and high school teachers, it's natural to not have time to have access to this information, but it may be in your best interest, especially if students are already showing flags in the beginning of the year, to see some of these trends. Who are the students that have failed math and reading in the past? And provide some, and closely monitor them to to possibly prevent them from dropping out because they're more at risk. So I'm going to show this video. This is a video of someone who has...
When I was in middle school, I would be taken out of class for a resource. It wasn't really explained to me like, you have a learning disability or you have an IEP, this is why we're taking you out of the class. But when a teacher would ask me, Lena, read this, or if I seen a word on a paper that I didn't know, I would make some type of big joke or just probably end up being a little rude to the teachers. And then I got suspended a lot. And I can really express that, you know, I don't understand, like, I'm acting this way so I can take the pressure off of myself. So it was real tough, but I felt like I did a good job covering it up because no one never knew that I was really hurting. My mom, you know, she didn't graduate from high school, but my dad, he graduated from high school, and they work a lot. And then it didn't help to my parents at all because they wasn't educated on what I was struggling with and what I was being taken out of the class for. To me, I just felt like I was in it alone. I dropped out at 15, 10th grade. Once I got my sophomore schedule, I realized I had no arts on my schedule. And when I went to the school and I asked, it was like, oh, you know, you are far behind. You need to catch up in academics. And I was real frustrated just to do straight academics. For me, it was just, I felt like that was gonna be overwhelming. So I made the decision that I didn't wanna go back to school. So I was working many jobs. When I met a reverend who needed someone to take his kids to school, I used to have to be at his house at 6:30 every morning. 5 months in is when Reverend Hardaway sat me down and he was like, you know, Lena McKnight, I want to ask you a question. Are you happy with who you are? Like, are you happy at the age of about to be 21, taking my kids to school every morning just for $40 in a weekly metro? You're a bright young lady. You should not settle for this. You need your GED. You're getting older. I have a good friend named Charlene Lawrence at this program called Youth Build.
When Lena first came in, Lena was actually one of the older students. A big part of what Youth Build does is work with disadvantaged youth, so we're an alternative school program for them. Lena was a little sad, a little angry, a little, you know, low self-esteem.
I love my mentors at Youth Build because they told me, no, you're not a mess up. Sometimes you have to get things wrong to get it right. One of the best things was they proved to me that they wanted me here. They didn't give up on me, which made me not want to give up on myself. I took my GED 3 times. On the third time I passed it. It was really the happiest day of my life. That was that point what made me feel like, you know what, I'm not stupid and I'm not incapable of learning. So once I passed my GED, I'm going to college. Being one of the first persons to graduate out of my immediate family from college is, it says a lot about breaking the cycle and saying that when you're faced with challenges, you can't overcome it.
Lena wanted to go to college to do social work so that she can help students such as herself.
I was going to college full-time in the morning, and in the evening, I was working part-time with the Harlem Children's Home as a 10th grade student advocate. I specifically wanted to work with 10th grade because that was the grade that I dropped out in. I was working with kids with learning disabilities, and they had IEPs. And I remember hearing that word IEP, but never knew what it was until I started working there. I would tell kids, like, listen, take advantage of it. I made sure that I educated them on what it is and why are they doing that. Nothing to be ashamed of. Having an IEP can help you succeed. So I would tell them, like, listen, if you have to get extra time on to help, think of it this way. While someone has to rush, I get to relax and really take my time and understand what I'm reading.
When Lena got her associate's degree, there was 1,000 people there. It was myself and Miss Felicia Gargan, who is one of Lena's other great mentors. We were both crying as we saw her name in the big book of graduates, Lena McKnight.
Sometimes I still have to pinch myself, like, Lena, are you really about to graduate in May with a bachelor's degree?
She keeps doing it. She's at a point where she's very focused. She's not letting those self-doubts of when she was younger stop her from moving forward.
So that was just a video of, I wanted to show you a video of a success story, and also some of the reflection that she had as to why she may have dropped out, and then and how she's giving back, and I think it's important and motivational for our students to see that, and for you as educators to see that the difference you can make, and what early on what we can do to help students like Lena to prevent it from even happening for her to drop out. So here's some risk factors. So once again, you're watching this on record. Think about your school and what are happening to the students in your school. Those that are retained a grade are at bigger risk. High absenteeism, failing grades, poor standardized test scores, and all these are very visible. You see it, you can feel it. These are all factual. You know how many Fs they may have or Ds, what their scores are, what the high absenteeism, how many absences. So that's all very obvious. Some of this other stuff is you have to dig in and make some observations. But in the literature, school climate, and that's the actual cleanliness and condition of the school, the worse it is, the more likely students are to drop out. Believe it or not, administrative experience, so interactions with the administration, including how administrators dress. One study showed that the more professional the administration dresses, the less likely students are to drop out. Family involvement, and that could be of no fault of the family if they do not have the time, if it's a single parent has to work multiple jobs, and just cannot be involved, but that could be a risk factor. Parents' education. If a parent has a high school experience or a college experience, they may be more motivated to have their students succeed because of, or maybe even in spite of, if they didn't reach the level of education they wanted to achieve, then that could be a motivation as well. But parents' education also is an indicator of if they cannot help the students, if they don't have a high school diploma, or they don't understand the math, they don't understand the reading, and if they can't help their student in the classroom, then that's going to be one less support system the student will have. Student to teacher ratio, small class size, does seem to help to give students more individual attention. And then student engagement and involvement. If you see the student is actively engaged or involved in clubs, then that's a good sign. Hold on, we may have a question here. Yes, there is a study that showed the more professional the students dress, the administrators dress, the less likely a student was to drop out. Yes. They looked at many different factors. This was just one of them: the school climate, the administrative experience, the family involvement, and the parents' education. So that's just an indicator. So you can't look at everything as one. So you can't walk into a school, see people all wrinkled, and be like, oh, my child's going to fail this one. Or you can't, as a teacher, go to school tomorrow and just start wearing a shirt and tie and thinking miraculously everyone's going to pass. So it's just a combination. When you look at trends and when you look at correlations and you look at the bigger picture, and if there's a lot of these factors, then that's going to be one of them. So Damien, when you become a teacher, put on that tux and go impress those students. All right, here are some specific strategies that can help, and we're going to go through some strategies for the next couple of slides, some interventions, and then some more statistics. A lot of this is informational, but as I stated right from the very beginning, hopefully you could use the information on these slides to start a movement in your school where everybody is paying attention to dropouts and trying to turn that number around, whatever that number is for your school. So more schools and mentoring programs are incorporating social and emotional learning into their curriculum. So SEL may be beneficial for students with learning and attention issues because it helps them understand their strengths and needs. But schools should be prepared to provide targeted SEL supports to help students who struggle with self-reflection and self-regulation. This is something teachers can learn. This is something counselors can help with. So looking at social and emotional learning and how that can be infused into the curriculum. Equity and idea regulations issued in 2016 aim to reduce disproportionate identification and disciplinary rates among students of color with disabilities by requiring states to use a standard approach to compare racial and ethnic groups. The regulations also provide funding that districts can use to address disproportionality. As I've stated on previous podcasts, students, especially minority students, are more often diagnosed with a learning disability. And sometimes it is accurate and it may not be, but just putting that awareness and making sure that everyone is being treated on the same slate is the strategy here. Early warning systems, perhaps one of the most effective is having those early warning systems, but this does take communication and cohesiveness where all students are on board. At the college level, I implemented an early warning system. We actually called it Blinker, where students, administrators could email a student's name, and I was the student services person at the time, and students would, faculty members would email Blinker, and then I would keep a history of if there are challenges with students. One of the most interesting ones was when I received an email from the maintenance person who had this rapport with a student because they were both Puerto Rican, and he noticed that this student was performing and missing class. Would have never have known if he didn't have that connection. And my solution was, well, if you have the rapport, you talk to the student and let's see if we can turn it around. And he was very excited about that. And he made that connection with the student, and we were able to save that student from dropping out of school. So everyone in the school system is a part of the dropout strategy. And early warning systems that focus on attendance, disciplinary coursework, anything can help keep students on track. If you're, depending on your school district, if you have good relations with the community, collaboration among schools, healthcare professionals, judges is critical to preventing juvenile justice involvement and addressing the factors that may lead to delinquency. There are diversion programs that are out there which offer screening, services, and family supports. They may be particularly helpful to students with learning and attention issues who are already struggling academically, socially, and emotionally. If we know this population of students may be more apt to engage in criminal behavior, then this is something through diversion programs we can be proactive and provide assistance. Cognitive behavioral intervention is another strategy. CBI refers to the number of different but related interventions used to change behavior by teaching individuals to understand and modify thoughts and behaviors. So it's a lot of self-reflection. It's a lot of intervention on the moment. When teachers see a situation occurring, a student not being able to problem solve or getting angry, taking the moment right there to pull the student aside and have them almost step outside themselves and analyze the situation and think about better ways they could have handled it. So that's all under the umbrella of cognitive behavioral intervention. And here are some steps if you were going to engage in, without your psychology degree, if you wanted to engage in cognitive behavioral intervention. Here's some ways you would address the student. You would tell the student, stop and think before acting, and may engage them in self-talk or relaxation techniques, especially for those that are aggressive or impulsive. You want students to identify the problem. If they are acting out and it is their natural tendency to do that, have them identify that, at least understand, well, this is what I do. Develop alternative solutions. Help students come to one or two solutions to address situations. And then have them either through role play, through picture, or through verbal, depending on your student's comfortability with communication. Evaluate the consequences of each solution. Select and implement a solution. So if it's a problem that's happening right there and the student has, you have provided the intervention, then you can help the student pick one. And then most importantly, at the end, evaluate, okay, so you decided to to go that route, how did that work out? What were the positives and what were the negatives? And this may require follow-up on your part. But this shows the student that you're engaged, that you're teaching the students how to react, whether it be an incident at the school with another student, whether it be reaction to a bad grade, reaction to a life situation that causes them to be absent. But these interventions are necessary to reduce some of the risk factors that we talked about earlier. If you don't have a dropout prevention program in your school, then this may be some time to propose it. And it may not be something formal, maybe like a neighborhood crime watch where you get teachers and administrators to volunteer to help and implement some of these ideas, and maybe not all. But you want to identify students at risk, and then most importantly, you want to do something with that. Just knowing that you have these students does not mean that that's going to help them at all. So having some strategies, assigning advocates to work with students at risk. And as I stated, it was, in my instance, it was the custodian who had a great rapport with the student. Providing support and enrichment to improve the academic performance of those at risk. Implementing programs to improve classroom behavior in social schools, and that's the CBI we talked about earlier. Personalized instruction in the learning environment. If your students are in your classrooms and they feel they're getting the individualized attention and they're in a positive learning environment, which is inclusive, then there may be less apt to drop out. And as I stated, these are all specific workshops that we have either talked about in the past or will be coming up in the future. So provide instruction that engages students and prepares them for graduation and skills they'll need after graduation. For those of you teaching in high school, this is probably already your priority. But making it more intentional and always having them think, what is the transition going to be like? If it's not high school, if it's not college, if it's the workforce, what is that transition going to be like? And having them become future oriented. So the National Dropout Prevention Center has developed 15 target areas, a plan for an entire school district to help minimize dropouts. So this information is good for superintendents, for principals, and for teachers. So we're going to go over them quickly. Each of these could be a workshop in itself, but I'm just exposing you to the 15 different ones. And if you're watching this on demand and you want to go specifically into one or the other, then of course we could do that. But systemic approach is number one. And this is looking at all your ongoing continuous improvement across all grade levels among all stakeholders, and then communicating a vision and a mission, tightly focused goals and objectives, selection of targeted research-based strategies and interventions, ongoing monitoring and feedback, and data-based decision-making. It also requires the alignment of school policies, procedures, practices, and organizational structures, and continuous monitoring of effectiveness. So looking at the school as a whole, whether it be a school system, a classroom, an entire school district, but having a chart and a plan where it's students that are feared that are going to drop out, that they can be addressed. School community collaboration. This strategy focuses on the power of an engaged and responsive community where everyone in the community is accountable for the quality of education, resulting in a caring and collaborative environment where youth can thrive and achieve. Critical elements of this type of collaboration rely on effective, ongoing, and multidimensional communications. Dropout prevention is a community-wide and ongoing effort. Getting parents involved, community partners, religious groups that are near the campus, but getting everyone involved in the process. Safe learning environment, and we went into great detail when we talked about creating an inclusive classroom, and also when we talked about conflict resolution. So those are available if you would like them forwarded to you. But safe learning environment, safe, orderly, nurturing, inclusive, and inviting learning environment, helping students realize potential as individuals and as engaged members of society. All students need to be safe physically and emotionally, to be expected to achieve, to be recognized and celebrated equitably for accomplishments, and to feel generally welcomed and supported. A safe and orderly learning environment provides both physical and emotional security, as well as daily experiences at all grade levels that enhance positive social attitudes and effective interpersonal skills. A comprehensive discipline plan and violence prevention plan should include conflict resolution and should deal with potential violence as well as crisis management. All this we have covered in workshops. A safe, nurturing, and responsive learning environment supports all students, teachers, cultures, and subgroups, honors and supports diversity and social justice, and treats students equitably and recognizes the need for feedback. Family engagement. You have seen this in your classrooms, I am sure, and if you've taken any formal class in education, you know that parental involvement is key to student success. So research consistently finds that family engagement has a direct positive effect on youth achievement and one of the most accurate predictors of a student's success in school. So having this type of collaboration rely on effective, ongoing, multidimensional, two-way communication, as well as ongoing needs assessments and responsive family supports and interventions. And this could be formally, this could be through social media, but having a way to connect the parents. And when you identify issues, having some interventions and strategies to address the issues that are occurring. Early childhood education. More and more studies are showing that the earlier students start school, those who have in preschool are graduate at faster rates than those who did not go to preschool. So birth to 5 interventions demonstrate that providing a child additional enrichment can enhance brain development. The most effective way to reduce the number of children who will ultimately drop out is to provide the best possible classroom instruction from the beginning of school through the primary grades. And you see this in your classroom. I have a 3rd grade teacher in the family who says, when he inherited the 2nd graders, they were already at a deficit in their learning, most of them. So the earlier we can start, especially since those are the foundation of learning, and the grammar and the math and the skills that we'll build upon, it's really important to focus on those early years. Early literacy development, early literacy interventions to help low achieving students improve their reading and writing skills, establish the necessary foundation for effective learning. Literacy development focuses should continue from K through 12. And primary. Mentoring and tutoring. From the video we saw the importance of mentoring. This is also has been increasing in the literature from research showing that this is extremely effective. Mentoring is typically a one-to-one caring, supportive relationship between a mentor and a mentee. Mentoring offers a significant support structure for high-risk students. Tutoring also typically a one-to-one activity focused on academic support and is effective practice when addressing specific needs in collaboration with the student-based teacher. Just today, we have students in our PhD program, and we identified students that you have 8 years at Keiser to complete a PhD program, and we've been having interventions with students who are in the 6th, 7th year. So today I met with one of those students and tried to provide an action plan for her, and one of the solutions that she came up with was to have a mentor. And she identified the mentor, and the mentor is going to help her. The mentor was kind of in the past, but she's going to be more active. But mentoring was something even she identified, and even at the graduate level, we are providing interventions to prevent students from dropping out and putting them on the path to succeed. So this is not only useful for K through 16, but K through 12, but also beyond. Service learning, and I believe in the month of May, we're going to have an entire webinar devoted to service learning. But service learning connects meaningful community service experiences with academic learning. This learning method promotes personal and social growth, career development, and civic responsibility, and can be a powerful vehicle for effective school reform at all grade levels. So we're going to talk about in a couple of weeks the importance of service learning, and then provide some strategies if teachers wanted to start out in the summer with service learning projects, how to engage their students with disabilities in these service learning projects. Then we're going to go into that detail, so look out for that. Alternative schooling, alternative or non-traditional schooling and delivery model options. This could be blended, virtual, Provide alternative avenues to credit earning and graduation, with programs paying special attention to the students' individual and social needs, career goals, and academic requirements for obtaining a high school diploma and transitioning successfully to life beyond graduation. For some of the students, maybe alternative schooling is the key. I know my niece and nephew want to go to high school, want to go to virtual high school, but I think that's because they want to stay home more and watch Netflix and Hulu and think it's going to be easier. But if your students are having social needs that they just cannot focus in a traditional classroom, then having alternative schooling may be appropriate for them, as long as the support is there and it's being monitored, because parents simply may not have time to do that. After school, out of school opportunities, the literature shows also how important it is for student involvement. So many schools provide after school, before school, and or summer academic enrichment opportunities that provide students with opportunities for assistance and recovery, as well as high interest options for discovery and learning. Such experiences are important for at-risk students because out-of-school gap time is filled with constructive and engaging activities. If we want to decrease crime rates or the amount of incarcerations of these population of students who are at risk, then probably filling their time productively is going to help with that. Also, when you look at schools from other countries, students from other countries and other countries that are performing better than our students, a lot of that is also the amount of time they spend in school is greater. The number of breaks are limited, and then the amount of after-school opportunities are increased. So this is something that's important. Professional development, no need to preach to the choir here. If you are on this webinar, watching it on recording or live, then you have already committed to professional development and you know the importance of that. But teachers, adults who work with youth, all should be providing some professional development on the latest trends, latest research, even if it's just to get a group of scholars together or teachers together with real world experience to brainstorm. And hopefully this webinar will encourage you to go back to your schools and have a conversation and discussion about what are your specific at-risk needs for your students, and then what are some strategies that have worked, and what are some strategies that you can improve on. And then create a wish list of, if you have the more money in your budget, what that would look like and what you would do with that to help increase at-risk, prevent dropouts. Active learning, the strategy that hopefully is already occurring in your classroom, and that's having students actively engaged in their learning, having them have a voice and a choice, having them take the lead on feedback, setting peer assessment, goal setting, cooperative learning, thinking critically, creatively, and reflectively, focusing on two-way communication. To be most effective, teachers must provide students with tools and strategies to organize themselves in any new material, techniques to use while reading, writing, and doing math, and systematic steps to follow when working through a task or reflecting upon their own learning. We did a workshop, Generational Differences, and one of the things we have talked about with Generation Z, this upcoming generation, is that with social media and technology, something that is lacking is the critical thinking and the ability to work through a problem. Students have apps on their phone. If they don't like the app, they can just delete and get a new app or wait for an upgrade. So not really having the students being able to talk through the problem if either their parents are going to save them or they're just going to delete something. So this active learning, where you're having them take the lead and be effective and set their goals and have them part of the process, is an important part, especially as students are in high school and getting prepared for college, where that critical thinking is going to be a focus. Educational technology, and some districts are better than others just by a matter of funding. But instructional technology can support teaching and learning while engaging students in meaningful, current, authentic efforts. So technology that is used the right way. And I know there's a newsletter that comes out, I believe monthly, from the Multidisciplinary Center, and it does have a section on apps that you can use to help students with school. So you want to check those out. And even Apple, I'm signed up for Apple. And somehow I guess I classified myself as an educator or teacher, and they'll often send me emails about free apps to use with the iPad. So having the technology, the assistive technology to help with our students with disabilities, of course, is going to help making sure it is functional, and then making sure that the students and the parents and the administrators and the teachers know how to use the technology. And then individualized instruction, giving students that individual attention, tailoring to their needs, and creating an environment where they study at their pace is going to help prevent dropouts. And then finally, number 15, career technical education. Programs related to career pathways and guidance programs are essential for all students. Youth need workplace skills as well as awareness and focus to increase not only the likelihood that they will be prepared for their careers, but also that school will be relevant to what is next. So these were 15 strategies from the National Dropout Prevention Center. If you are overwhelmed at this point, it is not unnatural. This was giving you the ideal utopia of, if all these factors were in place, possibly our dropout rates would decrease. You take whatever you can control, whatever level of administration you are, whatever you can control inside your classroom, and whatever of these techniques you can apply, then that's what you can do. And if you can get your school involved in more, then that will help. And that's the difference that you can make. So in conclusion, when all else fails, if you can just provide extra academic support and assistance for all your students. And by doing this, you're going to have to treat them, know their strengths, know their areas of opportunity, and treat them as individuals. Improve relationships within the school, such as counselors and teachers. Develop school relationships and communication with parents and family. Provide positive reinforcement to the student for appropriate behavior. Many times we may focus on the negative or the disciplinary and just give up on the students that are misbehaving or not following directions or acting out. But providing positive reinforcement whenever possible. Offering adult mentoring. We talked about the importance of mentoring. Assisting with transition from middle to high school. Those that may not have had the confidence coming out of middle school may transition to a high school where that may diminish. They may have gone to a school that was higher performing or had a more rigorous curriculum, and maybe they were the stars of that school, and now they transition to larger high schools and not feeling that way, or vice versa. But just keeping an eye out on students that are coming in, and then just monitoring the progress of academic achievement and behavior. Realizing that it is the saying, it takes a village. Well, if we want to do our best to make sure every population of student in our schools are successful and graduate from high school, because the ultimate goal is for graduation, for students to have that upward mobility, and for students to be have that chance with an education, then it's up to all of us, everyone from the custodian to the superintendent, to give students that fighting chance by implementing these strategies to help prevent students from dropping out. Are there any questions? And if you're watching this on record, of course, you can just email mrosa@keiseruniversity.edu, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. I can also probably give webinars for each of the 15 different strategies that I mentioned today. So if that's something you would like to entertain that thought and that you would find useful for your school, then feel free to let me know.